Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Wilds Talk. Today we're back to take a look at the Arch-Tempered Duna weapon rankings, where we look at the runners that have the best clears that we're able to find in the fastest times and compare them to one another. It, as usual, gives us a good idea of the current power of the weapons relative to each other, but as always, it's not a foolproof thing. We do our best to find the best possible runs that we can, but new runs are coming out all the time. Many weapons are going to have close times, so are very comparable. But as usual, it's an interesting thing to look at. The way these players are maximizing their weapons, any clever tricks they're using that we can learn from, and of course, a great excuse to check out the runners today. For this list, we only have one real rule for our list, which is basically no heroics, since most of us will never use that skill, and hey, plenty of runners choose not to use it as well. Starting at the bottom with the 14th place, which for the moment is Lance, with a 5 minute and 55 second clear. This is noticeably behind a lot of the other weapons, but still one that makes sense. Time and time again, Lance has been the weapon with one of the lowest, if not the lowest output. Other weapons that competed with it for this spot would be things like Hammer and Hunting Horn, until Title Update 2, where they're doing a lot better. It does make me wonder if they'll ever push Lance forward in terms of DPS specifically, because they've done a great job with the Wilds version of Lance, and especially the following updates that came. Like, by no means do I think it's a bad weapon, but it definitely does have some of that lower output compared to others. Anyway, one nice aspect of Lance is your ability to be an iron wall, where the monster can't really stop you from doing what you want. And as Duna does all her charges, her slides, her belly flops, her chest slams, or whatever small combo she has, you just stand there and guard it, perfect guard it, and turn the damage back against her. So it looks like a quite satisfying weapon, and a good one to use against the Arch-Tempered Duna. Next up then, we have Heavy Bowgun with a 5 minute and 38 second clear. We're hoping to see a bit more for the bowguns and bow in general in maybe the August update, because I've noticed they've been on the downward trend for a little bit. And it makes sense, to be fair, that the bowguns are maybe more towards the lower end of this list, because there isn't exactly a special hit zone that melee weapons are struggling to hit where they can maximize their range gameplay and take advantage of that. At least not in this specific fight. Either way, it's still cool to see the blade scale effect for the bowgunners, benefiting from that special evade so they can be a bit more perfect evadey in their gameplay. It's cool. But speaking of ranged weapons, the next weapon we have on the list with a 5 minute and 28 second clear time, so 10 seconds faster, we have the bow. Again, there is a lack of special hit zones that melee weapons can't quite hit that these weapons really benefit with, at least in these rankings and these runs. Admittedly, bow does a great job against Duna compared to some weapons that struggle more with her big slams and especially the follow-up waves. The discerning dodge of the bow allows you to perfectly iframe the slams and the waves at the same time, avoiding being pushed back, staying at an optimal close range for attacks, and we're seeing the perfect evade benefit from the blade scale coating as well as another cool bonus and fun playstyle that occurred with Title Update 2 for bow. This player feels that with perfect gameplay with no heroics, about a 5 minute timer should be reasonable. And I could definitely see that. And at the moment, that would put it more towards the middle of the pack in terms of rankings, but they're surprisingly close overall. And with the Dragon Piercer seeing great use in this run in particular, it's not bad for Duna, sending it down through the head, perfect hit zone, through that big meaty body, down the tail ideally, and getting these massive bursts of damage, especially when we see a knockdown where this is maximized. So very satisfying. Definitely some fresh gameplay coming out for the bow, but obviously on the lower end of the weapon performance at the moment. Above that then we have Light Bowgun with a 5 minute and 23 second clear, so really pretty damn close overall here, and that's going to be a theme for the next few. Say it one more time, ranged weapons, no specific benefits in this fight. No special hit zones that weapons normally can't reach, like we've seen for say Zoshia with the wing arms, gore magala for that matter, even the recent Legaicrus and his back crystal. So it makes sense that they're a bit lower, because they're not able to benefit from that aspect of the weapon. Still, they're able to reliably output great elemental damage throughout the whole fight, playing at an optimal range and just kind of chilling with the evasive, flowing movement of the Light Bowgun. Beyond that, there's not anything too special about the run or any special tricks we can look at, except for a little reminder that there's actually a boulder that you can drop when Duna goes swimming out of bounds. One of the ruins outside the water can be pulled and interrupt her super, which is something I've certainly not been making use of, so I figured I'd at least highlight from this run. Alright, jumping forward a little bit here, but not by a massive amount, we have Gunlance with a 5 minute and 18 second clear. Gunlance has been a bit up and down with the history of Wilds. It's been a top performer during the opening weeks of the game, and then I've noticed in the rankings it's fallen from the top spots to more of a middling area. So I don't think it's an underperforming weapon, and maybe the highest potential for it could be a tiny bit higher than what we're seeing here. But I do think part of it with gunlance is the fact that it gets to ignore optimal hit zones with a lot of its damage in many cases. But with Duna, with say that veil, you don't really care where you're hitting, you want to get that veil off as fast as possible. Then sure, you want to be at the head as much as possible, or the forelegs. So the gunlance doesn't get to just attack where it wants super effectively in this specific hunt, and I suppose that has some tell in the rankings. And with their super long combos, and not Duna being a bit pesky for that kind of thing, not giving you massive windows for DPS unless you've already got it knocked or CC'd in some way. So this player of course makes use of traps to do that, flash pods, and a mount knockdown too. So it's still very valuable to learn how to maximize gunlance against Arch-Tempered Duna. Next up then, to my surprise, we have Insect Glaive with a 5 minute and 17 second clear, just ever so slightly faster than the last one. Insect Glaive's been a bit of a weird spot since Title Update 2 dropped. It's not like it was nerfed or ruined or changed in really any relevant way. And from the length of the game from the start all the way until we hit Title Update 2, it was the top runner, the #1 spot in these rankings the whole time. And yet with Title Update 2, Seragios, Ligicrus, and now Arch-Tempered Duna, it's no longer literally #1. And I don't think that's because the weapon is weak or anything like that. In fact, I'm sure it's probably like a top 5 weapon in reality. We're just seeing a lot less Insect Glaive runners at the moment for whatever reason. I think looking at the gameplay, you see how impactful and strong this is, especially if you can time those offsets, or say dodging the waves by just bouncing up into the air and doing a little bit of aerial damage. Insect Glaive is definitely at its best when it can do that essence dumping super attack, going up and through the hitbox of a target, maybe reaching into optimal hit zones where others can't reach. Especially Zoshir is a great example of that. This player maximizes though as much as they can, opening the tempered wounds, moving around the target, flowing over and around, and of course using flash pods to interrupt the belly flop for a little bit of free DPS on top. So it's still very good gameplay. It comes from Pochi, someone we've looked at many times. They've been a top spot in these runs, so well worth checking out. And hopefully we see more Insect Glaive in the future. Alright, next up we have Charge Blade, roughly in the middle of the pack right now, with a 4 minute and 56 second clear. This is one of the bigger jumps that we've seen in the list so far, so it is doing very well. This player actually opens the hunt by maximizing their pop-up camp to quickly fill all their vials. This is a thing we're starting to see become more common amongst speedrunners, with the weapons that actually benefit from that, but not just that, can do it quickly. Obviously with Charge Blade, it's a super good idea to do, so if you're not doing it, maybe consider it. Set up your pop-up camps. Anyway, a big change for Charge Blade in Title Update 2 came with the scaling of certain attacks. They slightly reduced, say, the ticking damage of the chainsaw and enhanced things like AED, the vial pops, the elemental values. So we're seeing a lot of AED into the new follow attack that came in Wilds. It's a nice change of pace for the weapon and great in this fight because it means you get to be in your shield state a little bit more. This can then trigger perfect guards to ignore the attacks, getting off a clash for a free DPS window as we see in this hunt. Since there's a big hitbox to be hitting as well, we actually see a little bit of SAD follow-up after AED, which is very exciting, and using clever familiar tricks like the flash podding to interrupt the belly flops, targeting the tempered wounds, getting them open for a nice burst and even knockdowns. So one to watch if you want to learn the weapon and Arch-Tempered Duna. But that brings us to our next weapon, a pretty funny one to talk about. It's Hunting Horn, nearer to the top of the list yet again. After Title Update 2, it's doing super well. And we're back looking at, yes, the familiar QUA. Though there is technically a faster run than this. This run by QUA is a 4 minute and 43 second hunt, so slightly faster than the last one for sure. But there is a hunt that you might see online that's a 4 minute and 18 second clear, which is insane. But we do believe that was using heroic, so obviously we're not including that in this list. Either way, it's a familiar setup where we're pre-buffing before we get into the hunt. We're seeing a nice setup of the triple echo bubbles to maximize the reverberation. Great control with K-up build-up at the head, which is nice to see, since that certainly wasn't a thing you could do so well against Seragios in the last list we looked at. But either way, phenomenal gameplay as usual, and well worth checking out if you're interested in Hunting Horn. But even more exciting for me is this next weapon. We have Hammer with 4 minutes and a 41 second clear, just 2 seconds quicker than the Hunting Horn. The Hammer here has crept up nearer and nearer to the top spots of these rankings. It definitely fell off a little bit with the last list with Seregios, because again, you want to be hitting the head with the blunt damage, building up the KO. It's not so effective to do that against Seregios, but against Duna, it's absolutely phenomenal, and it's not too hard to do thanks to her head being low to the ground and lots of attacks leaving it vulnerable. We see lots of offset use against her big slow slams, which with all the new options is easier than ever, and then with a new follow-up, that gap closer and massive hit. What's amazing about this run, by the way, is the fact that it's so high up in these rankings, and this player had a bit of an awkward moment at the start where they got knocked out and had to be revived by their palico. So a better time for Hammer is definitely possible with a perfect run, maybe towards 430 or something lower, putting it even higher in this list if it's possible, and I think it is. So Hammer, your output's great. Your offset gameplay and all your options is absolutely phenomenal in this fight, so it should be a fun one. And if you want to learn how to maximize that, this is the run for you. But as we get into the top 5 now, let's start with Greatsword with a 4 minute and 39 second clear. Ever so slightly faster, and that's going to be the case each time here. With its slower lumbering nature, you can't do massive super long combos with the arch-tempered version, but you absolutely can get lots of true charge slashes off and create windows for that with lots of easy offsets, as this player is absolutely spamming offsets in this run. I swear, Duna has got to be one of the most satisfying and kind of easier offset spammers. And Greatsword's easily one of the best for that, being able to charge it to hold it, but also throw it out from standstill. Even in this context, the player does use a flash pod to interrupt the belly flops rather than offset them, but it is hilarious how many attacks are offset. It's like an all-out brawl where this Greatsword player just does not give any edge. Super satisfying to watch, but also clearly a very effective way to maximize Greatsword against this monster. So I think it looks really fun. But next up, we have Sword and Shield with a 4 minute and 37 second clear. This makes sense to me because, Sword and Shield's been performing pretty damn well in Wilds in general. If you're able to maximize some sort of decent element weakness, because obviously it's got super fast attacks, it's going to be great for that. And in this context, of course, they're able to smoothly work their way around the target, dealing great damage at the head, sure, but weaving themselves around the forearms and to the back leg where the scar is to open those tempered wounds up effectively. Then for any of the big attacks, it's perfect guard city, which can be done middle of the combo basically, so even more encouraging for that constant uptime. Again, we do see some flash pod usage for the belly flops where necessary, even smoother with this weapon. And I found it interesting how this player worked open one tempered wound at the front left foreleg, only to work their way during the knockdown to the back right hind leg to then open that tempered wound for an instant second knockdown for further control. Then they wove their way back towards the head to maximize DPS there, where I guess they could also build up a bit of KO with the blunt damage of the shield if they want to. So definitely a run to watch and learn from. But above that, next up we have Longsword with a 4 minute and 27 second clear to bring it into the top 3 of the rankings this time around. That's 10 seconds faster than already the very solid last run. And Longsword is just really effective, having played it myself against Arch-Tempered Duna. Some attacks you will actually want to foresight to reposition against, but all of her attacks with the waves you can just special sheath EI counter and completely ignore. The danger of foresight/countering though is the fact that the waves push you back at the same time, meaning even though you landed the counter, you can get pushed away. So of course, EI countering is going to be heavily rewarded and the better option in general, but what's new there, right? I did wonder with the changes in title update 2, would this player do anything interesting with the Crimson / combo and the better elemental scaling? As usual, it's just a lot, and I mean a lot, of Crimson 1, Spirit Blade 1 as the maximum DPS option to this day. This player was clever though with the longsword usage, opening up wounds and then keeping them so they could focus strike them later to recover back to red gauge. We did see a tiny bit of Helmbreaker usage, which is always fun, and I noticed that they would actually foresight counter against the chest slams in specific, not being knocked away from that and able to, slightly extend the duration of the red gauge, doing that once per red gauge. So there are little choices that make an impact here that are well worth checking out and paying attention to. But this really is almost a flawless run, so pretty incredible stuff. To my surprise then, our next run comes from Switch Axe with a 4 minute and 25 second clear, ever so slightly faster than the last one, so I would argue that they're very much intertwined and one could overtake the other. But Switch Axe at second place Pretty crazy. Now this player does do something a little bit cheeky at the start of the hunt. On the way over, they pull out a hunting horn to buff up, giving them a little bit of an advantage and edge. But, you know, the only thing we care about here is watching out for heroics, so it's completely fine. We also saw some interesting changes, say, to the switch axe and title update too, and maybe that's also telling in elemental vials in general. And so elemental vial switch axes fill up a lot faster. This lets you consider power prolonger as a requirement a little bit less, and then you can maximize DPS a bit better. Maybe that's also telling. Either way, a great part of switch axe against this monster is dealing with the waves, because your sword counter just completely ignores most of her attacks, leaving you in a great position to then combo straight into a full release. This is also a fantastic monster for offset spam, but I must admit in my own gameplay, I found it a little bit hard to reliably do that when sword countering was so heavily rewarded by comparison. Either way, like the rest of the runs, we do see the player carefully working their way around the monster to open up all the wounds and maximize them as interruptions and DPS windows. And we do see them use the offsets against the new backflip slam or barrel roll attack that the arch-tempered version gets, and the familiar flash pods for belly flops. And as usual, I recommend you check out the run. But that brings us to first place, Dual Blades, who has been top spot in the Seragios and now the arch-tempered Duna runs, much to my surprise. Now obviously things would change for Dual Blades in Title 2 in that they actually improved a few attacks, and they gave us that new movement combo attack, where as you activate the demon boost mode by perfect evading, you can go straight into Blade Dance 2, following straight into Blade Dance 3. A lot of the DPS we're doing is about, you know, Blade Dance 2, Blade Dance 3 as much as possible, while avoiding Blade Dance 1 due to its long animation, despite its great DPS. So the fact that they just gave us this beautiful flowing option where you land a perfect evade to avoid all the attacks anyway, to give yourself a damage bonus, giving you raw and element, but then also allows you to smoothly transition into Blade Dance 2, Blade Dance 3. Obviously as an element weapon and how we're seeing slightly better element hit zones a bit more consistently now, that's also becoming a bit more telling. And with that flowing gameplay, they're able to move themselves around the target and open up all the wounds really quickly in this hunt, and use the screw slicer evade attack as well as the perfect evade to reposition super quick and just stick to the target like glue, never really stopping. So also as a Dual Blades main, I'm absolutely thrilled by these results for Seragios and now AT Duna. It made sense for Seragios, who had pretty decent hit zones on the legs compared to the head, but to see it do so well here against AT Duna was a surprise, and I'm hoping we see more of it in future monster rankings. But this was a 3 minute and 54 second clear, so it's the first and only sub 4 minute run of the day. And we know that there's more coming in August, so I feel like we're eating good. Anyway, if you want to learn about it and watch some gameplay, check out this run. But yeah, that brings us to the end. Overall, obviously, the Dual Blades buff is kicking ass with Seragios and now AT Duna. Perfect evade doing work against the waves in that case, but also the new moveset options and general improvements. Hopefully more in August. It's looking good. Then, you know, you got things like Hammer and Hunting Horn, who have continued to just shoot up the rankings compared to every list before Title Update 2, so I'm really pleased for them. I do think the bow guns and bows have a bit more potential than we're seeing so far, but I do want to see them addressed in August too, if possible. And I'm wondering where all the insect glaive runners have gone, hoping to see more of them in the future. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope this was useful. Drop a like if it was. But until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.